Welcome to this week's episode of Virtually Amazing Assistants, the podcast for assistants everywhere. And this week, I have as my guest the most amazing Rhonda Scharfe. So, first of all, have I pronounced that correctly?
Did actually. Yeah, most people say Scharf, and I don't get upset about it because in German, that's the right way to say it. But when we came to Canada, they changed it to Scarf.
Okay. So, I just wanted to make sure I got that right because it's really annoying when people misspell or mispronounce your name. There are two Shelleys in our community, and we spell our names differently. And when other people write to me, they often spell it Shelli, which is how my friend spells it. And it really annoys me. So there you go. You just take 2 seconds to get it right. Just a bit of attention. So Rhonda is an amazing person. This is an amazing podcast. It's an amazing person. And according to her bio, which I have here as per usual, listeners, she has been a professional speaker for over 30 years. And I like this bit that you've been earning money from speaking since you were 2 years old when your mom used to pay you 25 cents to be quiet.
So I'm actually not 32. But yeah, but I guess I have been a professional speaker for much longer because mom paid me to stop talking.
I think that's so cute. Did it work, her paying you 25
I
cents?
don't remember. I don't remember. But now that I have grandkids, the thought definitely occurs to me to do so.
Yes, I know exactly what you mean. We have several too. So you live in Canada, which is great. We were in Canada back in September. My husband's aunt turned 100 years old.
Wow.
We have two kids who live in Florida, so we were on that side of the world, and we thought we got to go, and it was just amazing. She's still really with it, which is amazing. But you weren't always a professional speaker, were you? You started out as an administrative assistant.
I did. Yeah. My very first job right out of college, I studied nursing in college. And I jokingly say that I'm lacking something that all healthcare professionals need, compassion. So I said that I was a perfect match to working in as a secretary. And I started as a receptionist and I worked my way up in that organization, ended up being executive assistant to senior vice president, but started right at the very beginning.
I think that's a really good thing because it gives you that experience of all of the different roles, and as you elevate your get more elevated in your profession, you understand what you're expecting other people to do as well. If you become senior and you have a team, you then at least know exactly what you're expecting them to do. I outsource loads of stuff to my VA, but I only outsource it after I've done it myself because that way I know what I'm asking her to do, and she's not going to sit there and think, "Oh no, she wants the world from me," and it's too much. So I think that's really cool. So it says here that you were the computer geek in the office.
I was. So this is back in the 80s. I mean, a long time ago, right? And everybody was afraid of the computer. And for those of you old enough, you'll get the reference. And they used to call me up and say, "Help me, Rhonda." And because they, seriously, the real things like I can't find the any key where it would say press any key, right? And I've looked everywhere. I'm like, oh my goodness, it means any key, not the any key, right? So started right at the very beginning with dumb terminals. And because I just got it, that's how my role changed, evolved, and I ended up in training.
That's amazing because I have an affinity to that. I just got computers when it was a bit later than 1980. We had small children in the 80s, but we did get the computer at home, probably late 80s.
Okay.
No, early 90s, early 90s. My husband set up, he's an accountant. He went into practice by himself and was going to have the paperless office,
Yep. Sure.
which was very hard to achieve back then.
And
He's more or less there now, but
yeah.
40, however long that is.
Sure.
And so we got a computer at home when he was buying the computers for the office. We got an extra one at home, and it was a 386 with a floppy disk.
Yep.
What I was, yeah, everything was on a floppy disk. But I got hooked on it, and I went and I did a course on DOS with a girl with kids were at nursery school, and in the morning while the youngest was at nursery, I went and did 2 hours of learning DOS once a week. That was my introduction. So how have you seen the profession evolve over the years? Because obviously you've been in the you're no longer an administrative assistant. We'll talk about what you do next in a minute.
Yeah.
But how have you seen it evolve over the years?
Well, like, I sort of think about when I started as a receptionist and my boss was Mr. Donnelly. And interestingly, I had to call him Mr. Donnelly. Everybody else called him Todd. And in the interview, he said things like, okay, my name is Mr. Donnelly. You shall refer to me as such. And the way I was dressed, I mean, I was right out of college. I was in my mom's clothes. Like I wore her silk blouse, her linen skirt, her pearls, the whole bit. And he looked at me and my mom had beautiful taste in clothes. And he looked at me and said, the way you're dressed now is appropriate. And I'm thinking, I need a huge raise. So it was very different back. This was 1984 for me. And it was very different back then in that I pretty much took direction from him. Now, I was a receptionist. Of course, I answered the phone and did all that sort of stuff, but I waited. This sounds ridiculous for him to tell me what to do. And I was very much a task taker. Now, as I moved up in the organization, there was more that I knew to do on my own. And of course, all kinds of stuff that nobody knew about. But you still ended up almost having those morning meetings, which we should still be having now. But those morning meetings were, here's what I want you to do today, this, and this. And that was, 40 years ago. And so over the years, what I've seen is we're no longer task takers. We are ahead. It's almost like that morning meeting has changed and said, here's what you're doing today, this, and this, and here's what I'm doing today. So we're way more of a partner. Obviously, the role has evolved in that we're project managers and event coordinators, and where we manage teams and budgets and strategic planning. And it's really what used to be middle management is how I see the assistant role now.
Yeah. I think that's quite interesting because if you watch period TV programs, I'm going to call them period. I'm talking about 70s, 80s, 90s, not the 1800s. And quite often the executive assistants in those scenarios were men.
Yeah.
An executive assistant was quite a high position.
Yeah.
And it was a male position when women were not considered very much in the workplace, not like now. And so I think that's a really keen observation of how that has changed. And I mean, my husband still refers to his secretary that he had in his office, secretary, but she was so much more than that. And on so many occasions, he would say, I couldn't run my practice without Julia. It just wouldn't work. And she didn't just answer the phone and take notes. She did so much. And I think you're right. It's that proactiveness. And I suppose if you want to be a task taker, as you call it, you could still be that.
Sure.
And just kind of sit in a corner and do your own thing. But if you've got any sort of gumption about you, you're going to want more.
So the way I distinguish that is I say that if you want to be a task taker and you sit in the corner, you've got a job. If you want a career, then step up and be proactive and do that.
Yeah, really great. So how did you get into speaking? How did that all come about? How did that start? From your mom paying you 25 cents?
Other than Rob, yeah. It was really from the tech in that when people would call me up and say, help me, Rhonda. And the company realized I worked for a national real estate company, and they realized they needed tech support and they didn't have it. And they realized that I was the go-to person for all the secretaries at the time in the company. And so they developed, they had an IT department, but they didn't have help desk. So they transferred me, obviously I was willing, to be help desk. And then as the computers moved away from, we had the big floppy disks, then the little floppy disks. And, as they evolved, they needed someone to train all the admin staff. And that's how it happened.
Yeah, that's interesting because when I started training, I started delivering training in 1998. That's when I became an IT trainer, working for an IT training company. That was all they did at the time. And it had a help desk, and all the trainers had to sit on the help desk because we offered this help desk support for 3 months to anybody that had been on a course. But what I was kind of aiming for was in those days, when a company had a lot of staff or lots of admins or anybody, they would send everybody on a course automatically. You would start with a Windows course, and then you would go on a basic Word course and a basic Excel course and a basic Outlook course. And you'd work your way up through the levels because it wasn't a given that you would know how to use the technology. And what we're seeing nowadays is people are expected to know how to use the technology, and they're not trained, and they have to figure it out for themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. That absolutely has changed for sure.
Yeah. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. Although I definitely don't think that you need to sit on a full day course anymore.
That'd be painful.
I never really did. I used to say, people would come on on the course I was doing, let's say a word intermediate course, and on that course would sit mail merge. And that's because the company decided that that's where it sat within the 3 levels. But by the time you got to the after lunch hiatus, which is when mail merge turned up, everybody was asleep. They'd had enough, they'd had a nice lunch, and they didn't really take anything in. And they'd come to that course to learn that bit. So that's how I changed my model to just being much more small, shorter sessions. It's because I think that's all people need.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We can all learn lots, but we don't have to learn everything.
Exactly. And people say to me, how much should I learn? I need to know Excel. I said, well, do you need all of Excel? You really only need to know the bits you need to know. And let's get you knowing that bit well. And if you need any more, we can talk about that later. So you got into speaking because you ended up on the help desk. So what was the first time you spoke in front of an audience?
1990 was my official introduction into speaking with that real estate company. And it really was on how to use these dumb terminals with those floppy disks and stuff like that. So fortunately, I've never been particularly shy. I asked go on a speak in public course, like how to be a trainer type thing. Cause I was just doing like, here's the questions I get asked. Right. So they sent me to that. And part of it was, I don't know, 2 or 3 day workshop. And part of what I had to do was to do a mini little workshop in this class. And I was shaking so hard. I thought everybody could hear my knees bouncing. Right. And then I moved into delivering it all with my peers, which is actually way harder than strangers. So when I then had to stand in front of the room with all my colleagues and teach them things, that was way than the workshop was. But you eventually get over it. But all of that was late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, no, it's great fun. I mean, I love speaking in front of people. I get a real kick out of it. But after I've done it, I need to kind of put myself away in a dark room with a cup of tea, because I need that downtime after being so up. You kind of crash and burn. I'm going to a conference in London in February, and this will air after that. And I've got 4 sessions to deliver, which need to be prepared, but it will be great fun. I just kind of know it will be great fun. Unless nobody turns up, because you always, when you're doing something like that, you're always worried that nobody's going to come and listen to you.
Somebody worries.
Something. Yeah. So you've spoken in lots of countries as well, and you've earned lots of awards, and you're the only person who has 4 awards. I can't find it in my notes, but tell us about that.
So the certified speaking professionals, so much like all of the associations we have for administrative professionals around the world, there is also an association for professional speakers, and it has a governing body that is the Global Speakers Federation. So I belong to the Canadian end of that, a Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. And back many years ago, before Canada did the CSP, the United States conferred it. So it's called the Certified Speaking Professional. And less than 8% of professional speakers worldwide have that. I earned that 2002, so like 23, a really long time ago. And so I'm very goal oriented, so I like letters. And then in 2008, I earned something called the Spirit of CAPS. And so CAPS is a Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. It's peer awarded. And it basically means you've got a good soul, a good heart. You give back willingly. So that was, as you can imagine, a huge honor. In 2017, I was inducted into the Hall of Fame, Speaking Hall of Fame. And in 2019, I earned my Global Speaking Fellow, which there's only 35 people in the world who have that. And that means we have to work. The world is divided into regions, not some like continents, and you had to have spoken 5 of them, earned money, did well. So it wasn't just you travel the world and stand on the corner and start speaking. You had to be hired. And so those are the 4 that I have. Now, in fairness, only one of them can be earned by Canadians, the Spirit of Caps one. So that does kind of, it does narrow the pool a little bit. But even with the other 3, there's only one other Canadian that has the other 3. So they're pretty unique.
That's pretty amazing. That is pretty amazing. So have you got a favorite story from your speaking engagements that you could share?
Oh, Renee, yeah, they're all so situational. I'm not a memorized speaker. I have, I've got all my stories and, I know sometimes where stories fit in. I like, without saying a specific one, but I mean, I could, I like stories about my personal life. As much as, we all use the business stories, I can talk about Mr. Donnelly and I can talk about all the people that I worked with. But I find that when I tell the stories about my dad and me striving so hard for his approval, or I tell the story about my brother's first wife who hated everything to do with his family, or my son when he was a teenager, like when I shared those stories, those are the stories that everybody goes, me too. And then of course I try to point to what we're talking about. So I find that the stories where I'm human and I have struggles like you, those are my favorite.
Yeah, I think that is totally a good point. And just moving on to books, because you've written 8 or 9
Eight.
books.
8.
8.
Yeah, I've got 8. Yeah. I
What
I
are
love
they about?
so they all specialize, they all have the audience of administrative, amazing virtual assistants, amazing, all the other words that we call it. And the first ones were compilation books where I was a part of the book and I wrote about guilt because, we all know that as a working mom, I certainly knew about work. Yeah. And then I wrote about communications, and then dealing with difficult people is a piece that I write a lot about. So there's a couple books on that. Then I wrote one, Common Sense is Not Common Practice. And that's all the things that we need to do at work that people go, oh, I never even thought about that. Like, how did you not think about that? That sort of stuff. My latest book dealt with AI, and I wrote it in 2018. It's called Alexa is Stealing Your Job. And when you get into commercial publishing, not self-publishing, when you get into commercial publishing, it takes a year. It's like giving birth. They call it that for a reason. Like it takes a year after you've written it to get it out in publication. So it was released at the end of 2019. And it was all about artificial intelligence. And obviously, is AI going to steal our jobs? Hence the Alexa reference, right? And as we know, what happened in early 2020, the world shut down with the pandemic, and AI took off like a thought. So I haven't, that was the latest book that I've written, but I've got 3 in the works right now. I'm not sure if all 3 are going to make it or not. I love to write. And when I retire, I'm going to write. So books are easy for me. I write a newsletter every week, and they just come easy to me. So writing books are very satisfying.
That's great. So let's talk about AI because it's a huge topic and there is so much out there. I really only use Copilot. I started off with ChatGPT because that's what was out there. Then Copilot came along, and because I'm embedded in Microsoft, that's where I've put my focus.
Yeah.
But there is so much out there that can help. And do you really think, I'm sure you don't, because I don't think Alexa is stealing your job? It's just helping you do your job, isn't it?
It's so, of course, the line, I didn't make it up. We've all heard many people
Yeah.
say is artificial intelligence is not going to steal your job. Someone who knows how to use artificial intelligence is going to steal your job. The very same way computers were exactly the same. And lots of people got outsourced because they refused to learn. And so AI is the same thing. And I think it makes us so much more efficient. So again, that we can get away from task-based stuff, which is very not rewarding, to way more of the strategic and the valuable pieces to offer yourself and your company.
Yeah, I think that is absolutely true. Absolutely true. And I had a thought came into my mind, which with age, this is happening more frequently. Came in, went out again. So,
I hear you. Somehow there's going to be AI that'll catch that, and we just don't know what
oh
it is.
yeah, I'm sure they will. It was about AI, but I can't remember what it was. So, do you have any tips for administrative professionals to help them with their career progression or with their role or with deciding that they don't want a career or whatever it might be?
Well, first of all, give yourself permission, like just to go in your last point there. If they don't want a career, they just want a job. If you're at the point in your life, and I was there with little kids, I just needed a job. I just needed somewhere to go, money to bring home, and a life outside of changing diapers or nappies, that type of thing. And if we're at that point in your life, 100% give yourself permission to be there. Some people are at that at the back end of their career too. You know what? They just want it to be easy, but give yourself permission. But when you don't know if you want a job or a career, then really ask yourself, what is it that I like about what I do? And of course, we have to love we have to like what we do. We have to like the people we work with. You may not love, I don't love every little thing. As much as I used to teach Excel, I really don't like writing formulas. I can do it, but I don't love it. The AI is wonderful for that. And so find the bits of your role that really you like. When you go on vacation, what part do you say you want to go back and do first? And find that bits and focus on that. Naturally, I'm going to tell every admin to focus on always upskilling. And of course, tech is going to be the biggest piece of that. But like what you do, love the people that you work with. And if you don't, look for somewhere else. It's about relationships. If most people think about, their long friends, their best, like the people they hang out with, a lot of us say we met them at work. So have fun at work. Like want to go there, like the people that you work with. If you don't like what you're doing and you don't like the people, you're in the wrong spot, and give yourself permission to do that. But want to learn, want to upskill, want to offer. And when you do that inventory and it says, but want to, get your resume ready to go.
Yeah. I think that is phenomenal advice because so often people feel that they can't do anything. And I think it's right. It's all in your head, isn't it? It's all in your mind. You have to give yourself that permission. You have to be in the right frame of mind to do anything. You need to be in the right place to move forwards. And nobody else is going to take charge of your career and do it for you. You have to do it yourself.
Yeah. And you have
Whatever
to
it might be.
yeah, yeah. It's sort of like if you want to get in shape, then you have to want to go to the gym. If you want to eat healthy, then you have to want to put the sugar away. If you want to enjoy your job, you have to want to enjoy it.
Yeah, absolutely. Rhonda, this has been phenomenal and fantastic. And I'm so honored. I should have said this at the beginning, but I'm so honored that you said yes, that you would come on the podcast. I can't tell you, I was jumping for joy when you said yes.
Aw.
Real honor. Because I've been following you online for a long, long time. And I think you are amazing. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And there's going to be so much fun and learning for our listeners on this episode. So listeners, this has been Virtually Amazing Assistants, the podcast for assistants everywhere. And with me this week has been Rhonda Scharfe. And next week, I'll be back with another guest on Virtually Amazing Assistants.